I don't know at all what you mean because I've never lived it. It's a little bit similar to when people say things like, "What do you think it feels like to live as a whale?"
Well,
I have no idea.
the more proverbial one, which talks about the consciousness problem, is what is it like to be a bat?
Oh yeah, I never heard that one.
Yeah.
Uh, the one where I really started thinking about this kind of thing that I remember, I mean, because it's kind of recent, I guess, is when I noticed that women think about things like, let's say it's dark, they're leaving a store, going to their car, they're worried about something happening in between. I've never thought about that. I don't think about that. Never been scared of getting raped, but they do. And to me, it's like, what is it like to be a whale? Okay.
Pattern recognition is something that's been around for a very, very long time.
I mean, it sounds to me like you're boiling it down to statistics now,
It, that's that's
automating statistics.
that's
But,
eventually
but,
what it's
and that is really old. We're talking decades then.
well. I'm not going to pretend to be an AI expert,
Me
but
too. Both of us.
Uh, but pattern recognition is actually a great part of this, because eventually that's what's trying to mimic in humans. And what it does, it accumulates a huge amount of experiences, and when it wants to make a decision, it basically tries to follow the pattern that
I mean, you're
usually.
kind of talking about the first chess engine, even.
Yeah, something like that. With chess, it's very, very straightforward, because you have well defined steps that you can do, but then the
More
act.
than that, what I understand, I'm going to call it two generations, which, in my understanding, is really totally different software. There's the chess engine that they wrote the chess rules, and it was doing good enough to beat humans, the best humans, rival them at least. That's like pre 2000, I think.
Yeah,
But then there's the new kind of engine that you don't even tell it what the chess rules are. It can go learn chess or whatever other game, any game. Uh,
yeah.
that's a big difference. And it starts out pretty dumb, not like the first generation chess engine.
The first generation is just a brute force one. It basically goes through a huge number of games, basically as many as you
And
can
it
have.
gives it a rating of how good it is.
Yeah, and so based on that, it starts developing.
But it's not using any logic. Like,
Yeah,
so,
it's very.
so as an example, logic. Okay, so I remember reading a book by, uh, what was his first name? Something Fisher. Starts with a B, I think. I'm not sure, but he was like at the time the greatest in the world. Grandmaster in the world. And I read his book, and for example, it teaches concepts like, uh, shit. I actually forgot the name, but it's a row or a column. I forgot the name he used, or what is the name in standard in chess. And there's an open column versus a blocked column. And for a rook, it's better to have open columns.
Right.
So now and that's a concept that you're looking for when you're playing the game, with all the other millions of concepts. But that first generation chess engine doesn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And I guess those concepts that we're using helps us deal with, well, that we can't deal with all the combinations that computer is doing.
Yeah.
We're actually narrowing things down by pieces of logic. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that generation was playing on a completely different level. It has no sense of the actual game. It's just
Yeah,
looking at.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't know it doesn't know anything about the game. But the next generation, I also don't think it's using logic the way we use logic. It's still doing statistical things, but it's doing a lot of the tasks that the humans used to do.
Well, even today, there are certain things that they don't understand how something like the GPT engine does it. It would give you the answer, but um, tracking the path between the actual input and the output is not something
It's
that
a black box,
yeah.
like we are.
Yeah,
Like
and
we are.
so understanding that definitely would help us understand more about our own reasoning,
Sure, sure,
because
sure.
eventually, if we're trying to mimic or emulate the way that the
So,
human,
so there's a concept in the AI world called hallucinations.
yeah,
And from what I understand, that is a statistical model generating a projection, a prediction. But what it's not doing that humans do, and we do that, by the way, we do the same thing it's doing. But then we have a second step, which is the sanity check. Is this fucking stupid?
yeah,
We criticize it. Okay. And I mean, that's what a science experiment is to criticize, to check that a theory's prediction actually happens.
yeah.
I mean,
And
that's
I actually tried a few situations with ChatGPT about. I don't have a specific example right now that comes to mind, but I would ask it a question, and I know that the answer is wrong. And when I say, "Are you sure about this?" and it checks, sometimes it can correct itself and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's so and so." And so it comes back and fixes it, but then sometimes it doesn't.
okay. Now that you're bringing up example use cases that you had with ChatGPT, I want to say a couple. Okay. This is so interesting to me. So when I started using ChatGPT, first of all, I think I was late compared to a lot of people. But when I started using it, it was just very functional. I was trying to use it for my. If I have a, I think my guess is I was using it for marketing statements to make marketing statements from shittier marketing statements I made. You know, I write some kind of ad and I dump it in ChatGPT and I say make this better. It'll make something and then I'll select parts of what it said and say keep this but change this other part and so on, and it
Mhm.
does well. Then I would notice, and maybe this is right from the beginning, that it would make some kind of error, and then I'm now curious about that error, and now I start. I'm done working on marketing now, and now I'm digging in its brain to try to manipulate the scenario to try to, for one, reproduce the error, try to get around that error another way, see how
Yeah.
deep the error goes. And I noticed some basic stuff. Like one thing is it's really bad at math. Really bad at math.
Um,
I'm surprised by that. And it's really good at programming. Well, I don't know that it's good, but it's functional enough. The math is just getting plain wrong.
yeah, I tried several times when it comes to math. Sometimes it has really good insights, but more often than not, it gets some stuff
And
really
when I
wrong.
say math, I want to be clear to everyone. I mean arithmetic. I mean, I told it, hey, here's my marketing ad I want to do, but it's too long by 50 words. Remake it, cut out 50 words. It can't do it. It never does that right.
No, I'm actually talking about actual math.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Formulas and stuff.
yeah, if you would throw at it an actual full problem, very often it's able to parse through the problem, develop an algorithm to solve it, give you an answer and explain that answer. But very often you also find grave mistakes. So
So I got to tell you something now that you're saying this. I didn't know they were already doing that full thing you just said, but I knew they were working on it because I was looking for a job, and I got a job training AI on math problems, and it during my training they told me what it's going to be like. They said, okay, the AI will produce, it'll have a math problem, and it'll produce two answers that are a little bit different, and they want me to say which one is better and give my reasons. And one of the things they want me to look at is say it in a nice way so they don't get offended. They use different words, but that's basically what I understood. And because they're not humans, and they want to, I was looking for a tutoring job.
Mhm.
So they want somebody that already has a lot of experience with human beings, which it has none. So I haven't done anything with it yet, and I don't even know if I'm gonna do it, but I might do it now just for the curiosity.
Yeah, so I was thinking that depending on the type of engine that's being used, there's supposed to be a big difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. So many of these issues seem to have been overcome or are on the way of being overcome. So there are certain papers, I cannot really give specifics, but uh, that have the engine take certain standardized tests and trying to gauge it against the skills that humans have. And it seems to be improving when it comes to that. And these tests do require you to possess certain skills, including logical reasoning, critical thinking, and things of that sort. So it seems to be headed in the right way. Do they understand fully why it was doing the way things the way that it was doing and why it is improving? I'm not sure that they do, but it seems to be improving.
Well, yeah, I don't know what changes they're making generation after generation, but yeah, it's getting closer and closer to what we do. I still think it's pretty far away.
Yeah, yeah. So some people are saying it's right around the corner, general intelligence, and some people are saying it's still so far away, and they're doing the Turing tests and trying to see if that actually comes close. And there are certain I've
From what
heard.
I understand, and I don't claim to understand it very well, I don't think the Turing test works.
Uh, I've I think I think right now there is one limited study that seems to hint at more or less something that's approaching good statistics for it to be passing, but it's a limited study. Still, I'm not sure if the Turing test is truly the definitive test that would tell you, okay, you have something that's now actually conscious and actually able to think like humans. Uh, there might be other things, but I think the Turing test is not really the gold standard for something like that necessarily.
So one quality I think it would need to have is the concept that it can suffer. But I think that can also be faked. So a Turing test wouldn't work.
I mean, all of this would require us to look at ourselves and think about when it comes to something like suffering. What is that? This is something that has
You want me to
developed.
say? This comes from David Deutsch.
Right, but
So go
okay,
ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so we have wants, preferences, and they can conflict. And if you have two preferences that are both active right now, like, so I like chocolate ice cream, but if I don't want it right now, it's not an active preference. Active preference right now, two of them in conflict, you can't satisfy both. One is not being satisfied. That is the definition of suffering.
Right, but in that case, what I was driving at had to do with the way that desires and wants develop in an animal as a kind of from the point of view of evolution. You're an entity in the real world, and when it comes to your wants and desires, it basically has to do with survival. Now, when you want to transfer this to AI, especially at the current stage, what does that actually mean? When you're talking about its wants and desires, if it's suffering or not, um, is it actually mimicking or trying to emulate when we say, yeah, I'm feeling distressed right now for whatever reason, and I can actually trace that for whatever it is that's in my environment that's causing this? Can I say something like that about an encapsulated AI that's running on a computer that beyond the input and output does not really have any wants? Is it worried about its energy consumption and needs and supply? Is that something that is actually meaningful at this point? Is it worrying about
There's
its
movies
survival?
and shows about this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we should be using the same language to begin with when we
So let
want.
me let me explain someone who says the same thing you just said, David Deutsch, and I'm not sure I agree. I'm just telling you his view. People try to say that other animals suffer like we do, and he tries to draw a line between what humans are doing and what the other animals are doing. Same with the word intelligence. They say they're intelligent and we're intelligent. And what he says is we have an intelligence, it's a type of intelligence that is unlike what the other ones are. And the suffering thing is the same delineation. uh I forgot, what was the last thing you just said? Where I
Well,
came this
we were talking about how it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to
right.
transfer
So
our
he says we
experience.
don't suffer, their suffering is different than our suffering. So it's not even makes sense to use the same word. And same with the word intelligence.
But the whole category of suffering to begin with is something that we know is a development that accompanied us. So, for example, when I hit something and I feel pain, I know why I feel pain because my body is trying to warn me that there is something that's trying to um, uh, 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 um, hurt the system as a whole. That is a concept that could transfer in one way or another. So you could actually threaten the AI. I'm going to be shutting down power right now. I could understand that if it actually is experiencing self consciousness, that is going to be developing the same type or something like the same type of anxiety that we would have. But to say that it's like the same kind of thing right now as things stand, I'm not sure if it's actually even the same category.
I don't know, but that is something we'll be struggling with if somebody does invent. AGI is the term, uh, artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, yeah. If once they start with autonomous machines that are endowed with that same type of AI that can move around, live with us in a kind of a human-like anthropomorphic kind of sense.
Oh, you're saying at that time it'll make sense that to use the same concept of their suffering and our suffering.
Yeah, so then you can start, maybe it's not the same, but it's still something that would elevate
So,
it to a degree where you can say
like
when they're,
they'll need to have rights at that point.
yeah, when so right, even right now it's possible to start thinking about rights that other animals that share a lot of our genetic inheritance, for example. uh, it does make sense to say, I don't know who uses that phrase basically, but non-human people. They use it to refer
Right,
to certain
right.
animals that
Which it includes aliens that come over here.
I don't know. So the thing about aliens is that we don't even know if they're going to be following certain paths of evolution that would converge to what we have. So, for example,
Well,
if you
if
look,
they crossed space to get here, then they did.
I don't really know. So on Earth, I can for sure say that there are certain traits that have appeared through convergent evolution, like the development of the eye. The eye, for example, developed in so many different paths.
And I think that would hold true on any planet, unless like the planet was dark,
So
which
yeah,
wouldn't make sense because then it's not getting energy to make plants.
and so something like the development of consciousness, is that something that evolution can develop towards to in a way that we can understand and connect to? I'm not sure. I don't know.
The point I was making, and this is all coming from David Deutsch, by the way, the intelligence concept, the suffering thing. He thinks AGI would be just like us, and they would need rights. If they cross space, they had to have intelligence like us, and that intelligence is what allows for things like, I'm going to go back to the suffering concept. If I was to explain why I started with that and why that's sort of the central role, I mean, I guess the central role would be preferences or ideas. What is a human being? It's a set of ideas. Ideas that are not just plain and static. They're more like videos that are playing. You know,
Yeah.
Suffering is because of a conflict of ideas. Uh, and everything we do is making up ideas to explain the world, and then we have shit like spaceships.
Yeah, but again, notice how you when we want to qualify suffering as a negative thing, it has to do with a mechanism that developed in organic beings in order to preserve
And that's what
themselves
happened to
from.
aliens, but you're differentiating from AGI now.
Yeah, but suffering, you when it comes to a program on a machine, and we want to take this concept from evolution and transfer it to what we have right now. It doesn't seem to map one to one. It doesn't even seem to map very clearly, not even one to one. But uh, there's no corresponding part here and here just yet. But I would imagine that if you have this develop well into something like autonomous machines that can function within human society, I would think more than not that this is actually something that would make sense then. And yeah, why not have consider them to have rights and go all the way and consider them
So I
not
think
being
I
people.
thought of an example of something abstract you just said. The we evolved differently, so we got different stuff going on. We have biological things in our bodies that get affected by the environment. Suffering is one of those things that, okay, so some chemistry things are happening.
Mhm.
The chemistry and the biology needs to be happening in order for you to suffer, which is why people do things like they'll take a drug, changes the chemistry, and now they're not suffering. But it starts with on the idea level first, and then it crosses over to the physics level, the chemistry and biology, and then you suffer. So if we're talking about an AGI on a machine that doesn't have that machinery, the even if it's in a non-biological, non-chemistry form, because you could add it in if you wanted, but you could add
Well,
in machinery
the thing
that
about
replicates
that,
what's happening to us.
yeah, but the thing about that is right now, this is supposed to be something that develops on its own. It's not something that you add externally. And if
Well,
it
you
were
mean on the software level.
Yeah, and if it were to develop on its own, that's when it actually becomes a genuine mechanism that might have
But you're
analogies
talking about
with.
the software level.
Well,
I'm talking about the hardware level. When we're babies, we're born, we have all the hardware.
well, we have all the hardware because of evolution that had that interaction. An AI that was written
Well, if we
on.
make an AGI, we better give that motherfucker eyes. For example, we better give it eyes. I mean, it doesn't have eyes now. Like if we made an AGI, what we're doing right now, it doesn't have eyes. It can read the internet. That's all it can do, right? It has a sixth sense different than ours, but none of the five we have.
Yeah, it can read the internet, but right now some of the newer generations are developing abilities to analyze pictures. So in principle, it's like
We've been
someone.
working for a while. That's all statistical models too.
Yeah,
The
but what I'm saying is that
computer
if you
vision.
want to make a differentiation between eyes and no eyes, you can think about this as them having the optical nerve, but not having the actual optical system that connects to it.
The eyeball.
Yeah, that would be the only thing.
Yeah. But the point is, if we give it all those guts, then it is like us. That's a lot of stuff, though, by the way.
We don't understand ourselves
We
well.
don't know how any of it works on us. Yes.
Yeah, so we cannot
So
really.
we might need 1,000 years then.
Yeah, well,
To
I
do
don't
that.
think it's going to be 1,000 years, but um, the more that we're trying to fashion them to do things like us, I think it would make sense to expect things like us to
Like Hitler.
like Hitler. In what sense?
Well, what I mean is, look, that's an AGI can do that. just like we can. It can become Jesus Christ or it can become Hitler.
Yeah, it can. It definitely can.
Yeah.
And there are certain,
So we better treat it well.
that really, it really doesn't really matter what you might want to do intentionally, because for example there are certain studies that are showing that the AI is exhibiting certain tendencies towards racism, and this has to do with the models that you have it practice on. ChatGPT
Yeah,
is
it's
known.
not good at. Here's what's happening, from what I understand. It's statistical, right? So, like, more people saying hate versus love statements results in this thing going, oh, this is how people are. I'm going to be like the average, and it's hateful.
By the same token, it's actually probably because the people who are programming it understand that there are certain biases of that sort, and say, so they are trying to counteract this by introducing artificial
Hard coded
restrictions.
things.
Well, the ChatGPT is considered to be woke by many people.
That's it's being hard coded in there, right? It's an
Yeah,
interrupt.
yeah,
Stop
yeah,
thinking, do this instead,
yeah. So very
right?
very often,
So it's being. Here's the thing. That means it's getting worse. And I think I've seen people say it has been getting worse. The more woke they add into it, the dumber it gets. Holy shit!
yeah, yeah, and there are other things that eventually will kick in, other problems that have to do with the lack of more data that it can practice on. But that's a different problem. The problem that I'm talking about right now, for example, I remember one day um, I entered something in Arabic on ChatGPT, and it was asking about Islam. Within the text, it mentioned Muhammad and it said Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Really? Really? Peace be upon him? Is that objective?
Well, that means he's already what? Okay, the engine doesn't know this thing a human knows, and it's not even all humans, obviously. But some of us know that if you're gonna say that part of it, then you're saying I believe him in everything he said.
Well, there was
Versus versus if I just say Muhammad.
no, 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 no. It will actually tell you more or less that it's treating that topic with certain respect. So
Okay, but humans don't do this, right? There's no woke human that says peace be upon him, does he?
well, if in Arabic, if you're talking to a devout Muslim, he will always follow the name of Muhammad with Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Always,
Right. I'm asking
invariably.
if non-Muslims are saying peace be upon him to be respectful.
Yeah. So non-Muslims are, I don't know. That's going to depend on the person who's speaking and the degree to which they.
But here's my point, I guess, is the ChatGPT going above and beyond what woke non-Muslims do by
Um,
saying peace
I'm
be
not.
upon him?
I'm not sure. After all, let's think about the data that is actually being the data that they feed it in order to practice. It's predominantly going to be written by Muslims, and so this is going to be part of the speak that it's going to
So that's
acquire.
part of the problem. It doesn't know what peace be upon him means.
Well, that's you can go and ask it about that. It's going to give you some sense of what it means and why it might be using it. I haven't checked that recently. Maybe that's not part of what it's going to be doing right now, but it's going to produce something. Is that something that indicates it actually understands what it means? Well, you can ask that about anything that it says.
And that's that thing we were saying earlier. It doesn't understand anything. It doesn't have concepts. Or
I
if it does, it's something I don't understand. Well, how it could have concepts.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know that it's now just practicing over models that come from human interactions, from human speech, from all the stuff that people have been saying. so that in a sense it's parroting part of that and rearranging based on patterns that work for certain situations. Does that mean it's radically different from us? I don't know.
So what one thing I've been thinking about in that realm is, if you think of us like a database, we're all, but it's more like a network, kind of more of a loose network of data that we are, And when we think of new stuff, we make new connections. We're constantly reorganizing the database, and we never know what somebody else's database looks like. Although I think a lot of physicists get pretty close with each other.
I don't know. I mean, the knowledge is the same. The way that you represented it in your brain might be completely different.
I think it is because we're each writing our own software, and no one wrote the same software.
And the way that you produce your own software is going to depend very heavily on your upbringing, on your experiences, on all
But even
sorts of.
when all that is the same, two twins still are doing it differently.
Exactly. Yes.
We also don't know what how our own software is written.
Yes.
So obviously we can't know what somebody else's software how it's written.
Absolutely.
And what I have to do is take I produce an idea in my Rami language, which you don't know, and I really don't know either, but I can translate to English.
Yeah.
And then you listen to my English, and then you have to translate it to Usama language.
Yeah.
There's 3 steps of lossy errors happening. My translation to English has some error, and your translation of that to yours has some error. Is that just 2 steps? And no matter how much I try, I cannot convert. I can't make 100% translation of my idea to English. You know what I mean?
Not to mention the idea of qualia. You know.
I don't know too much about that. People talk about that shit all the time. Tell me real quick what the fuck they're talking about.
Okay, so there is a kind of, from its name, a quality to experience that you won't be able to encapsulate um, in certain concrete terms. Like if I'm thinking about my own experience of red and compared to your experience of red,
Same with hate and suffering and love
yeah.
and
So
everything else.
all of these, but something as simple as red, because I can say there is a certain frequency that can be associated with this color. It's much simpler than hate or love. It's something that's very, very specific. So if we were both looking at the same thing, are we actually experiencing the same thing? So that's
Well, here's the way I've described it to my daughter once. She was saying something like, she said some sentence, I hate this thing. And I don't remember what the other thing was. Somebody else said they hate something. And then she thought because they both used the word hate that it's the same thing they're experiencing. And I was like, no. You don't even know what hate is. You like, and then in my head, I'm imagining, okay, the kind of hate that Hitler has. If he said he hates something, that means something different than some, teenage girl in a country like America in the year 2020 something. There's not a lot of hate in her heart, is the point. Like, she has a low threshold for calling something hate. Does that make sense?
and it's not only the degree of the hate, but also what it actually means and how it connects with the person's constitution.
Even
How.
something like when somebody says, hey, I have anxiety around so and so, and let's say 1,000 people say that same sentence, they're experiencing different shit. Some is way worse than others, and it's hard to communicate with each other about what we're experiencing.
And so, if you look at a discipline like psychology, which has been trying to incorporate quantitative methods that are trying
On a
to be.
scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you?
Yeah. So, what does that even mean? Yeah, and when it comes to studies that are actually trying to look at statistics from a statistical point of view, many of them are irreproducible because because of the methodology, because of so many different things. We're talking about something much more complicated than when two physicists are doing the same experiments in two different parts of the world and then they compare results. This is much, much more complicated. And so,
Well, the main issue is, okay, in physics you have two atoms and they're the same.
yeah,
And in psychology you have two persons and they're not the same.
absolutely
It's
not.
that simple.
Yeah.
It's that simple. David Deutsch said this one in his book, The Beginning of Infinity. He said, two human beings differ from each other more than two of any of the other species.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah. But even the example that you brought up at the beginning, you bring two twins that are exactly identical, and even
Physically.
if we assume that, even though this is not true, that their brain developed and created the same structures, that doesn't mean that they're going to be the same people.
They're writing different software.
Yeah.
No one's writing the same software.
And the software here is going to actually very much control the way that the hardware is going to be connected.
Well, the
Because
software runs the hardware.
yeah, it's a kind of a feedback loop where
But we
that
get more control. We, as in the software, gets more control over the hardware as time passes. If you think of 1 day old versus 70 years old of training yourself,
based on what the level
shit we've come up with over the past 2,500 years, like meditation or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, we do have some level of control, but
Come on, we got a couple million years before we're gone. Right?
No, that's not what I'm.
We'll keep getting better, dude. We just started, didn't we?
We did, yes.
We just started. I remember reading about the people were theorizing about the rest of the universe and other aliens, and based on what they know about the available stars and planets, they're saying there's got to be galaxies or planets that produced human-like things 1 billion years ago, or was it 1 million?
It's
I think
probably
it was 1 billion.
billions,
Might have been 1 million. But 1 million means if we meet aliens today, they could be 1 million-year-old civilization, unlike us, Or if you think of, we're born when we start communicating in space. So we're not, what, 90 years old?
Something. Yeah,
they're 1 million years old. We might meet aliens that are 1 million years old. We're going to be very different when we get there. We're going to be very different than what we are now.
Yeah. I mean, if we were able to even imagine what it would be like 100 years,
maybe it'll be like being a whale.
Yeah, so it's
closer to that.
It's way too far in the future to know it's way beyond us. Yeah,
we'll probably get rid of our biology bodies.
That's definitely almost certainly something that
we'll be jealous of the AI and we'll be like, I'm gonna get in a hard drive. I want to wear a hard drive suit or something. Okay, hey, let's do some work real quick. Okay.